I'd like to bring up to the stage Eric Holdsworth, who is the Senior Director of Climate Programs at Edison Electric Institute.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon for this exciting panel. I'm Eric Holdsworth, the Senior Director of Climate Programs at the Edison Electric Institute. EEI represents U.S. investor-owned utilities. Our member companies provide electricity for more than 220 million Americans and operate in all 50 U.S. states and the District of Columbia. In co-hosting this important forum today, EEI is honored to once again partner with the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. But I'm going to make a few framing remarks and then introduce our keynote speaker. Following that, we'll turn to our panel discussion, and Elliot Derringer with the Center for Climate and Clean Energy Solutions will introduce our panelists. I want to take just a few minutes to offer a few framing remarks before introducing our keynote speaker, Ali Zaidi. When the ABAC process, the American Business Act on Climate Pledge process, was launched last year, EEI members were amongst the first to join, including Berkshire Hathaway Energy, represented on our panel today by Kathy Willems. Our other industry panelists were also part of this early wave of companies to join the ABAC effort. 1 year later, as I'm sure our keynote speaker will talk about, more than 150 companies have pledged to take action to address climate change. To me, the ABAC process helps demonstrate the power of public-private partnerships. To that point, EEI and electric companies in the United States have been able to cut their carbon dioxide emissions 21% below 2005 levels as of the end of last year. The convergence of technology and public and private partnerships are creating opportunities with federal, state, and local partners to revolutionize communities through an enhanced clean energy infrastructure. Through these efforts and that of the ABAC process, we believe that we can define a successful energy future together. I'd now like to introduce Ali Zaidi, with the White House Office of Management and Budget, Associate Director for Natural Resources, Energy, and Science. Ali helps oversee the implementation of the President's Climate Action Plan and works with other White House partners on new strategies to tackle climate change. He's a leader on a range of environmental issues, and as I'm sure all of you, are excited to hear what he says. So rather than listen to more of me, let me turn the podium over to Ali.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for being such an incredible partner on this work. For the U.S. government, we are, of course, a big consumer of energy ourselves. We buy billions of dollars of energy as a direct consumer, but we're a drop in the bucket of the U.S. economy and the consumption overall. And so the recognition that we can't do this alone is a pretty obvious one if you take a look at the math. The group you have on this stage, I think, is representative of not just the ABAC pledge members, but frankly, a host of small businesses, large companies, people across the investment arena who have come together around the recognition that a low carbon economy is the one we've got to go seek out. And what we've been really fortunate to have is partnership on three types of strategies to advance this low carbon vision. The first has been around finance and innovation around clean energy finance. We've got folks from the private sector who've really stepped up and been innovative partners in pioneering PPAs, building certainty for renewables developers, bringing forward investment in things like energy efficiency. We've also had innovation when it's come to technology. So a lot of these folks are voting with their feet. They are going and investing in the technologies, the breakthroughs that are making it easier every day to achieve the low carbon economy vision that we are all setting out to achieve. So that's another way their commitment is manifest in the marketplace. And finally, I think you have these companies really pushing for innovation in the policy arena as well. This isn't just a group that has stepped up to support voluntary efforts. Across the ABAC group, you've seen people step up and support initiatives like the Clean Power Plan, the administration's effort to put common sense standards to reduce pollution from the power generation sector. We've had auto companies that have stepped up to boost fuel economy standards. Our cars are going to go twice as far on the same amount of fuel. And we have people across the built environment taking steps to advance things like appliance efficiency. So taken together across finance, across technology, and ultimately on policy, we've benefited a great deal in the United States from partnership with the private sector. And the good thing is a lot of these people do business in a lot of countries outside of the United States. So this is not a playbook that just works in America, but it's a playbook that we're excited to export. And I know these people are catalyzing, galvanizing activity, the agitation towards a low-carbon economy all over the world. So we're excited at the power this partnership represents, the role that we've had in playing to sometimes convene these guys and sometimes catalyze them, but honestly, to benefit from their leadership. And we are so excited to see how this set of actors and this partnership continues to bring transformation to the marketplace and advance the clean energy economy. So thanks for this opportunity to join you, and I'm just as eager as you are to hear from the panelists.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Ali. I'm Elliot Derringer of C2ES. It's my pleasure to introduce our panel this afternoon. You know, at C2ES, we have been deeply engaged for many years in mobilizing climate action by business and by working to strengthen the global response to climate change, the global framework for climate action. And of course, those two are very inextricably linked. So we're really thrilled to have with us today representatives of 4 companies that really have been at the leading edge on both fronts. I'm going to introduce our panel from your left to right. We have Kathy Willems, the Senior Vice President for Environmental Services and Chief Environmental Counsel at Berkshire Hathaway Energy. Nanette Lockwood, Global Director, Policy and Advocacy at Ingersoll Rand. Kevin Rabinovich, Global Sustainability Director at Mars Incorporated. And TJ DiCaprio, Senior Director of Environmental Sustainability at Microsoft. And in a minute, we'll hear from each of them about what's driving their companies to invest in the low-carbon, clean energy future. But first, I just wanted to reflect for a moment on the important interplay between what companies say and do and the vital efforts here in Marrakesh to continue strengthening the global response of governments to the urgent challenge of climate change. Companies and governments respond to signals from one another. And I think the Paris agreement was achieved in large measure thanks to the vocal support of businesses and other non-state actors, which gave confidence to governments to bring forward strong contributions and to commit themselves to progressively strengthening their efforts over time. One example of the signal from the private sector is the more than 150 companies, as Eric has mentioned, including the 4 represented here, that put forward commitments as part of ABAC, the American Business Act on Climate Pledge. Other examples of signals from business are the statements that C2ES has organized with a number of companies in support of a new global climate agreement. The most recent of those statements was just last month when we reached the threshold for the Paris Agreement's entry into force. That statement was signed by 11 leading companies: Berkshire Hathaway Energy, Calpine, HP, Intel, Lafarge Holcim, Microsoft, National Grid, PG&E, Rio Tinto, Schneider Electric, and Shell. The statement, which you can find on the C2ES website, lays out the business case for the Paris Agreement, how the agreement helps to strengthen business action by providing clear long-term direction, by strengthening transparency, by helping to address competitiveness concerns, and by facilitating carbon pricing. So those are some of the signals from business. And with the Paris Agreement, business is in turn receiving the strongest signals ever from governments. And I think there's plenty of evidence that that signal is being heard and that it's being internalized by companies in their long-term decision-making. One example I like to cite is Kathy's boss, Warren Buffett. who cited in his annual report to shareholders the Paris Agreement as further impetus for the really remarkable investments Berkshire Hathaway is making in renewable energy. Another example is the recent announcement by Moody's that it is now factoring countries' Paris pledges into the way it assesses credit risk. Now, the direct internalization, I think, of the Paris signal by business, by other non-state actors at all levels of society, is one of the keys to the durability of the Paris Agreement. The agreement was designed to be durable, to withstand shifts in political currents. Yes, the actions of national governments here and at home are absolutely critical, but I think in the end, the activation of investors, of CEOs, and other decision makers outside government may prove just as critical to the agreement's success. So with that, now let's hear from those who are best able to articulate it, the business case for climate action from the companies themselves. So each of you have made significant commitments through ABAC and on your own. Please tell us why and what keeps you committed to climate action. And we're going to start with Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me know if you cannot hear me, because obviously there's a lot going on, which is really exciting and I think raises the energy level. Hopefully your lunch hasn't kicked in too badly yet. So Berkshire Hathaway Energy is the energy division of the Berkshire Hathaway organization. We have approximately 11.6 million customers worldwide that we serve with 21,000 employees. We have a number of regulated utilities in the U.S., meaning we're subject to Public Utility Commission regulation. They regulate our rate structure and terms and conditions of service, for example. And those companies do business in the West and Northwestern United States, in California, Oregon, Washington, as well as Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. We have a company called NV Energy that serves about 95% of the electricity load in the state of Nevada. And the state of Nevada doesn't have a whole lot of people in terms of their native population, but on an annual basis, approximately 40 million people visit that area. And I can assure you, if the lights go down on the Las Vegas Strip, Houston, we really do have a problem. So. Mid-American Energy is kind of my home base, based in the state of Iowa. And I'll talk more about them, but they serve Iowa, Illinois, South Dakota, and Nebraska. We have a renewables company called BHE Renewables that was actually formed at the end of 2011 to help serve the demand for renewable energy in the United States. 2 natural gas pipelines that crisscross the country. We also have operations in Canada. We have a transmission company in Alberta, based there. We have operations, a distribution company, electricity distribution company in the UK. And we also have hydroelectric operations in the Philippines. We joined the American Business Act on Climate Pledge as the first electric utility when the pledge was first kicked off in July of 2015. And we thought it was an important message to send to the international community that big business, all the way down to our customers, are interested, engaged, wanting to advance renewable energy. We're trying to meet our customers' needs in a responsible fashion, and set forth in our pledge the way we were going to go about doing that. And at that point in time, about by the end of 2014, our organization had invested approximately $15 billion, with a B, dollars in renewable energy. And part of our pledge was to invest another $15 billion in renewable energy. And I'm happy to report that in just over a year's period time, we have advanced that objectively in a very significant way, including the fact that, coming back to my Midwestern utility, by the end of this year, Mid-American Energy will have 4,048 megawatts of wind energy just in the state of Iowa. Iowa is a relatively small state with a population of 3 million people. So 4,048 megawatts is pretty substantial. However, recently, within the past couple months, we received approval from our utility regulator to add another 2,000 megawatts of wind generation in the state of Iowa. That project will be complete by the end of 2019. And in that case, we will be able to deliver renewable energy to our Iowa customers at about 85% of their average annual load. And we have a vision to get to 100%. It might take us a little bit longer to get there, but I don't know of anybody who can cite those kind of statistics in terms of renewable advancement. But we're also kind of harnessing the power of markets, not only on climate trading or carbon trading, but we helped, along with many, many other people, to resolve an issue that has arisen as a result of additional renewable deployment in the state of California, where there are certain periods of time during the day when the renewable generation in California, because of its relatively aggressive renewable portfolio standard, doesn't have a place to go. And if it had to stay in the state of California, they'd be shutting down or backing down some of those facilities. So through something called the energy imbalance market, we've been able to take some of that renewable energy from California, use it on our system, on the Pacific Corp system, and ultimately it's resulted in a reduction of CO2 emissions. Now just in the third quarter of 2016 alone, which of course is some of the hottest months of the year in that part of the country, the benefits from that energy imbalance market and being able to better utilize renewable energy have been more than $5 million for our NV Energy customers, over $14 million for our Pacific Corp customers, over $5 million for the California Independent System Operator, and the nice part is we also reduce CO2 emissions by more than 14,000 metric tons. So that's in a very short period of time when energy demand is high. So those are some of the ways that we have engaged and implemented our pledge. We'll continue to do that. It's a longer-term process. We are always looking for ways to advance that proposition, and I will look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Kathy. So we've heard first from a company that's in the business of generating and delivering energy. We're going to hear next from a company that helps customers use that energy more efficiently. Nanette Lockwood from Ingersoll Rand.
Thank you. As part of our pledge, we reiterated our climate commitment. And Ingersoll Rand is a large, diversified industrial company. We're a manufacturer. Some of our names that you would probably recognize are Trane Air Conditioning, Thermo King Transport Refrigeration, Club Car Golf Carts, if you play golf, and Ingersoll Rand Tools. And so our climate commitment really revolves around our refrigerant-bearing products, which is the Trane and the Thermo King brands. And so in this climate commitment, we basically agreed to invest $500 million until 2020 to discover alternative solutions to the refrigerants that we were currently using, which are HFCs. And so we've been right on track, $100 million a year, trying to figure out what the next generation solutions are. In that, we've agreed to convene the industry, academia, various stakeholders to try to understand what the market needs. In the absence of regulation, you want to make sure that your investments and your technology developments are moving forward in the right direction. And a lot of this is in order to reduce our emissions. So we have committed to reduce our emissions by 20 million metric tons by 2020 and about 50 million metric tons by 2030. And this is both our facilities and our products. So we have been working very diligently. We've actually started launching products, and we have launched some of the the biggest products we make for the biggest buildings in the world and have been deploying them all over the world. For example, the English Channel Tunnel is now being, their big water-cooled chillers are being replaced with some of these new technologies. And in that, we will be saving 40% of the energy use just by replacing the older technology with the new using these alternative refrigerants. And we will be reducing emissions by 372,000 metric tons. So, you know, the projects, they're all over the world, and we're helping building owners do the same thing. And so we're really excited about the progress that we've made. We continue to make progress in the refrigerated transport area, where in Europe we actually have introduced a product that can retrofit existing products. So we can use a new refrigerant in the existing products that are out there today, so people don't necessarily have to buy a brand new refrigerated transport unit in order to reduce their emissions. Our customers have really enjoyed this, and even though there's no regulation in Europe that is mandating this action, we sell, I think, about 90% of all of our products now are next generation. And so we see consumer demand, consumer is interested, building owners are interested, and we're seeing this all over the world. So we continue to invest in these because we do see an appetite for it, but we also are committed to sustainability. Our sustainability is embedded across all of our businesses. We have 11 strategic business units, if you can imagine. And so everybody is aligned. Our over 42,000 employees were excited at the beginning. They continue to be excited. This is something that they all work on. Our climate commitment is embedded in our CEO's goals. So everybody is at stake in trying to find a new way to save energy, save emissions, and find a way to appeal to consumers to do this. So with that, I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Nanette. Next, we're going to hear from Kevin Rabinovich of Mars, which is a company, not a planet. You may not know it by name, but I'm sure you know some of the products.
Thanks, Elliot. Actually, company and a planet, but I'm from the company. So Mars is a very large global food business. We probably make a lot of the chocolate brands that you're familiar with: M&M's, Mars, Snickers, as well as pet food, chewing gum, rice, and a coffee and drinks business. In terms of Mars, in terms of why we committed to the ABAC pledge, our story starts in 2007 or 2008 with the fourth report that was published by IPCC talking about the results of the climate change analysis and the modeling and the risks that we faced, and that. Along with sort of more general currents about the importance of organizing around sustainability, really catalyzed a discussion internally about our need to put together a program and to set some targets. Am I winning the war against whatever's going on next door? Or? Okay. So what we realized was that there was an opportunity for us to develop some climate change targets, CO2 reduction targets, based on science. So in 2009, we made a commitment that by 2015, we would deliver a 25% reduction in our carbon footprint from direct operations, and that by 2040, we would be zero carbon from our direct operations. I'm pleased to report that as of last year, we delivered on that 25% target, and we're continuing to march forward towards that 2040 target. In terms of how we got there, really two strategies. One, which Nanette already spoke about, which is around efficiency. So we work very hard at reducing the energy use that it required to make our products. Some of that is through our own engineers and intelligence and cleverness, and some of it is working with our supply chain partners, our vendors that supply the equipment to us. The other part of our strategy is renewable energy. So obviously we're never going to run our business with no energy. So we've got to be efficient with the energy, and then we've got to switch to zero carbon energy. So we not only work on on-site renewable energy projects, we also work on larger off-site projects. So in the run-up to Paris, we were able to share that we'd done a deal in the U.S. covering 100% of our U.S. electricity from a 200-megawatt wind farm in Texas This past March, we announced a similar deal in the UK, covering our UK manufacturing operations and offices. And then just last week, we announced that we've now signed a contract for a project in Mexico, which will also cover 100% of our facilities in Mexico. So that's what we're up to. Why are we up to it? There's a couple of reasons, really. I think what we've seen is there is a real opportunity here. Not only the falling cost of renewables, but the untapped potential of energy efficiency that we found in parts of our business and that others find in parts of their business. The exciting thing for us was the idea of working on these issues not just as a cost savings initiative, but as a means to delivering a sort of a higher goal or a bigger picture goal of sustainability and climate resilience and reducing impacts on the world motivates our associates in a way that inspires them to then go out and find better ideas, which then enables us to save more money. So we use it to drive sort of a virtuous circle of both sort of purpose and financial performance feeding each other. What we're working on now is looking to continue to deploy and push out, broader and more widely. We're also working with a lot of other companies to try and accomplish similar goals. So we're members of and actually helped start a group called RE100, which is focused on 100% renewable energy, 100% renewable electricity, excuse me. And through coalitions and groups like this, what you start to see is that there's a common thread and there's a common argument that business recognizes that there's real value in this. Maybe the final comment I'll make in terms of why we're active in this area and why we support work on climate change is we're an agricultural business at heart. So we're a food business, which means that all of our raw materials start on a farm somewhere. Those farms are outside and therefore are exposed to the climate. So when the climate starts to change, those farms start to change and what they're able to do and their productivity starts to change. And that affects our business very directly in a financial sense. So we're motivated to work on those issues. We're also then motivated to encourage others to work on those issues because no matter what Mars does on its own, without the work of other companies, many of whom aren't up here on the stage with us, we won't tackle this problem collectively and we won't solve for the risk that climate change represents to our supply chain. So, and like the others, happy to take questions afterwards.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And last but not least, TJ DiCaprio, representing a company that I'm sure you have all heard of, Microsoft.
Thank you, Elliot. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. And Microsoft, as part of its pledge, has been operating carbon neutral since 2012. And our operating principles as part of that commitment are to operate lean by driving efficiencies, by operating green, procuring renewable energy, and by operating accountable. And the way we drive accountability in our organization is we have a corporate carbon tax. We call it our carbon fee. And we charge each of our business groups, we have 14 business groups, a price on carbon for their operations. And that includes for operations from our data centers, our offices, our software development labs, and our business air travel. And we collect those funds and we spend those funds in 4 different investment categories. And that is for renewable energy, for carbon offset community projects around the world, for what we call climate grants, where we support and accelerate innovation for technology and climate-related projects, and then for our tracking and reporting to increase transparency. And so as a result of that, over the last 4 years, we have reduced carbon more than 9.5 million metric tons. We've procured more than 16 million megawatt hours, and we've impacted more than 7 million people around the world with our carbon offset community project investments. And so, again, with our renewable energy commitments, we've made a commitment to move up from 44%, consuming more than 44% of renewable energy with our data centers, to more than 50% by 2018. And Microsoft is committed to its sustainability goals, to its clean energy goals, and we see our role, along with the broader private sector, critical to addressing climate change. And our investments and innovation in this area are good not only for the environment, but also for our business and for the economy. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions as well.
Thanks to all of you. I mean, we've heard some really remarkable stories from 4 very different companies, stories of commitment, investment, and success. And I want to thank you for all those stories. While all of you are thinking of questions you might want to ask, I'm going to take the prerogative to throw one out to whomever among you would care to field it. All of your companies do operate to one degree or another multinationally. You're U.S.-based, but you operate outside the U.S. as well. And coming to Marrakesh, a COP like this, gives you an opportunity to interact, engage with representatives of governments, private sector, and other countries, and maybe give you a better sense of how the collective resolve that we see expressed in something like the Paris Agreement is translating. So based not just on your conversations here, but your experiences on the ground outside the U.S., how do you see the response to the signals from Paris playing out in those other national contexts?
Elliot, I'll jump in since I have the microphone in hand. Well, Microsoft, we understand that there are critical factors at play, and it's been very inspiring to see the passion here at the conference. And these factors are, even within the United States, at play at a city and state level. We also see the policies at a country level in the countries where we operate. And then for the energy markets, for utility modernization and clean energy, all of these factors play together. And we see working with our partners around the world and that we've engaged with even here at the conference in order to further advance progress for these very important issues.
Yeah, and to that end, sorry, I just wanted to mention that, you know, we've been coming to these meetings for many years, and I don't think it's ever happened where we have not been approached to answer questions. You know, we try to talk about projects that we've done. Obviously, a lot of them are up and coming, but I think countries and their industries have a desire to learn from some of the things that are happening in the U.S. and other places around the world, and so they really look for the information that we can help them with on the ground in their country.
Yeah, I guess the perspective I would offer is as a global business like all of us here, you know, one of the things that helps us run our business more effectively and more efficiently and more profitably is when we have alignment globally, right? You know, it's sort of an extreme example, but you know, I've got to carry, as does everyone here, a little thing around in my backpack because the plug in the U.S. doesn't match the plug here, doesn't match the plug of it, right? So that's a tax essentially that we all end up paying, right? So to the extent that the world is aligned around something like the Paris Agreement, that helps us run more efficiently because we get consistent direction, consistent signals. We know, you know, everyone is pushing in, you know, maybe not at the detailed level, but at a big picture, everyone's pushing the same direction, and that makes it easier for us to operate and lets us be more economically effective and profitable as a business.
And I think there's 2 aspects. One is I can take the things I learn here based on the conversations I have back, which I think is a really critical piece. It's not just being here and sharing information, which is a fundamental piece. And I've talked to a multitude of individuals and organizations about what we've done and how we do it, and you know, just thinking it from a different context rather than traditional, boring electricity supply, right? But also, I think taking the information back in terms of, you know, unless, you know, I haven't had to do it yet in Marrakesh, but I have done it in Bonn, where I've sat on the floor for 2.5 hours until my legs were numb, you know, listening to people's concerns and being able to take that back and translate to tell people how important an issue this is, I think is hugely beneficial because that information flow goes both ways.
Yep, absolutely. So, Kevin, you talked about the importance of alignment. TJ, you talked in your opening remarks about accountability, how Microsoft has established accountability within the company. Of course, an important aspect of the Paris Agreement is the accountability that it seeks to provide through a transparency framework. By establishing expectations for how countries report on their emissions, on their efforts to fulfill their contributions, and then allowing for some international scrutiny of that reporting. It provides governments and others the ability to have greater confidence that countries are in fact moving forward as they say they will. How does that increased transparency and accountability through a global framework help all of you?
First and foremost, transparency is not only accountability, but it provides education and awareness. And what we've seen at Microsoft as a result of that is engagement in great thinking and engaging the minds of the people that are involved. And so I think that on a global basis, there's so many great ideas that we can share and can build on that momentum on a global basis.
Yeah, I guess the thing I would say about transparency is, so one of the things that I think the business sector has definitely embraced as an idea in sustainability is that there are things that we should compete with each other on, right? Our chocolate does taste better than the other guy's chocolate. Be clear about that, right? But there's other things where there's no reason for us to compete, right? You know, my boiler's more efficient than your boiler. If you're selling boilers or air conditioning units, compete on that. But as an end user, that's not something we should compete with our peers about. So being clear and focused on what are the things where, to use the metaphor, the rising tide can lift all the boats, and then what are the things where actually our boat's going to sit a little higher than yours, and being very clear about that has led us to a lot of collaborations and interactions that we would have otherwise missed out on if we weren't sort of being a bit more open, quite a bit more open about our goals and what we're working on.
Right. And transparency for us really helps us in our global innovation. We have 5 engineering technology centers, 2 in India, 2 in China, 1 in Prague, and their job basically is to work with domestic markets to try to figure out what they need, how they can help satisfy that, how to work domestically with those industries to try to figure out how everyone can kind of evolve to the point where high efficient products actually matter, can be produced economically and move the needle for energy efficiency. So for us, it's really sort of the predictability. It gives us the confirmation of where we're going as a company, where we're going with technologies. Being first is very lonely. So as a technology innovator, you want to make sure that you're relevant in all economies.
Well, we don't have much competition internationally because we can't transport the electrons that far yet. But the measurement process is very important because I think it helps us drive lower, if nothing else. We're looking at is there somebody else that can produce electricity with a lower carbon footprint, and if so, how can we learn from that? And you've got to have the information as a fundamental and be willing to share that information.
Great. So let's open it up to your questions now. Tom's got the microphone. Who'd like to go first?
Yes, just please raise your hand, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself as well when you're giving your question. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Madeline Tyson. I study energy transitions at Arizona State University. And I'm wondering, given our current situation, it seems like these types of coalitions, whether it's between mayors or cities or businesses, are going to be increasingly important in driving U.S. progress. So I was wondering what either opportunities or thoughts you have for thinking about where else and how else we can do this more.
We won't ask you to elaborate on what you mean by our current situation.
I guess I'll start. So I think You know, I mean, maybe I'll pick up on 2 points, right? So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we see a clear business case for this, right? And I think what happened, use my example of the energy efficiency that we hadn't spotted before because we were just looking to save money, right? When we went after it with a bigger purpose, we actually found more money-saving opportunities, better engagement, more excitement. So I think that's an opportunity that has excited us, and we see this as a way of driving more engagement and then better performance essentially from ourselves and from our teams. It also helps make people want to come and work for us. And one of the other resources that's scarce in the future is talent, right? So we want the good talent. The other thing I would say is I think there's a real opportunity for us to bring to some of these issues skills that we already have as a business, right? So I mentioned we've done our long-term renewable energy projects. So we got involved in those because we care about sustainability and our carbon targets, and right? But as soon as the discussion starts, it's a discussion about capital allocation, about commodity risk management. Now, the commodity is electricity instead of cocoa or chicken, but it's still commodity risk management. And it's about how do you structure a contract and how do you balance risk? And we understand that. We know how to do that. So it was initially a little bit of a surprise to us that we actually had some real relevant expertise to bring to that discussion that let us drive some of these things forward. So I think the idea of reframing that there is real business opportunity here, right? There's a little bit of activation energy that you have to get over to say that I'm going to go put some time into something that maybe I haven't before. But once you get over that hump, you find there's gold there. And the more we can get people to appreciate and not just understand, but actually feel that, right? I think that feeds into the point that Elliot made earlier about is, these targets, these programs, these goals, need to transcend individual leaders, be they in governments or in corporations, right? So we've had a CEO retire and a new CEO take his role since we started our targets. We didn't, walk away from the targets and rewrite the whole thing, and we won't rewrite them when this CEO retires, right? So we're solving long-term problems, so we need to put structures and systems in place that are consistent and durable.
I'll add, on the electricity side, it's all about partnerships. We enter customers' homes every day in one form or another. And we have to, whether those customers are the individual residential customers or our larger businesses or our cities and towns who now want 100% renewable electricity. So, a partnership, for example, with the city of Salt Lake City, Utah, is really critical to help them meet their 100% renewable goal while doing that in a way that they can afford that the city service costs don't need to increase just because we're doing a subscriber solar project with them. We have found on the renewable development side that we can bring those renewable solutions to our customers at very low cost and sometimes no additional cost. The additional 2,000 megawatt project in Iowa that I referenced, that is zero net cost to customers. It's a win-win-win for everyone. It's a win for the environment. It's a win for our customers. It's a win for us. So it's those kind of things I think that the partnerships are absolutely critical, and we need to continue in that respect.
Just conclude that by making a note that we're all on this journey together. And as we started our journey, keeping our own house in order, taking a look at our own operations, how can we drive lean, green, and accountable behavior, we're also progressing now to go beyond our carbon neutral operations. And that's through these partnerships on how can we bring renewable energy onto the grid, not only for ourselves, but for our customers? How can we reach out and improve the lives and develop a low carbon economy for people around the world? And so I think what you see, it's almost like a personal progression, is this, okay, we learned how to take a look at ourselves and operate, keep our own house in order. Now, how can we expand that to our suppliers, our customers, to communities around the world. And that and the nature of that progression lends itself to more and more partnerships, to collaborative behavior, and again, the transparency that comes with that in order to continue this momentum.
And I just wanted to add quickly that, to all of these great comments, that, the businesses have been looking at this for a long time. We didn't call it climate change years and years ago, but, you're now looking at decades of investment. The businesses are not going to walk away from this. We've now seen the business case, and we are continuing to grow. That's what businesses do. Once we set a direction and we find we create value in markets, we continue down that path. So I think innovation will continue, commitments will continue, and just because of the events of last week, I would not venture to say you would see a huge change in direction from the business community.
I'd like to underscore one of the points that came across here. You have the importance of networks of companies, networks of cities, networks of states. But I think it's really important to understand the linkage, the power of the linkage among those. Because by working together, and a lot of our efforts are now focused on strengthening those linkages, because I think by working together, each of those stakeholders can go faster and further in reaching their goals.
All right, do we have any questions? We have one here.
Thank you. Stephen Myers from the University of Kassel in Germany. Thank you all again for your talks. My question is mainly towards Kevin. Your processes take a lot of thermal energy too. How do you plan to meet all your thermal energy demands with renewable energy? Thank you.
That's a great question. Not only for us, but actually it's a great question in the broader sense, right? So I think for renewable electricity, although we and everyone else hasn't done it everywhere yet, you can kind of see how it's coming, right? The prices keep coming down, people keep solving, grid reliability with intermittent sources, so you sort of see where that's going. The thermal side's a little trickier, right? It's trickier for a couple reasons. One, in many parts of the world, particularly the U.S., where I happen to sit and where Mars has about a third of its operations, we have staggeringly inexpensive thermal fuel, right, in the form of natural gas, which is a boon in the sense that it has helped shift power generation in the U.S. to be lower carbon, if not all the way to renewable, but it creates a challenge on the thermal side. The other thing that's a challenge on thermal is the idea of remote projects like large wind farms in Texas or Scotland or the Yucatan that then supply into the grid and distribute remotely is a little trickier, right? Thermal energy doesn't move as well once it's heat. Gas moves around reasonably well, but it's a great question. We are working on it. I think the one thing that's clear is that there are many other ways to make heat other than burning fossil fuels. There's sort of more direct ways, concentrating solar, and there's bio-based systems. What we've actually done recently is brought together a group of companies that, like us, have a thermal skew to their energy mix, with some NGOs, with some life cycle analysis type experts, to try and think through what are really the barriers to accelerating thermal energy in the way that renewable electricity has accelerated, renewable thermals. So we're trying to think through and work through some of that, but it's a great question and one we don't have an easy answer for. We do have, there are a number of projects that we do have. So we have several facilities in India that run on biomass. So there you have sort of an interesting case where you don't have a well built out natural gas pipeline network. So your competition is diesel, which helps on the economics. We also have quite a large project in France, actually, where we're taking steam from a waste energy facility, which happens to be in the industrial park with us. So, it's going to be a little bit more of an all of the above, different strategies, and we're still in the early piloting stages. But yeah, we're absolutely committed to it. And if anyone's got any clever ideas, here I am.
We have one question here in the back.
Hello, thanks for this talk. My name is Amy Harder, and I'm a reporter with the Wall Street Journal. I wanted to follow up with something that Nanette said about what happens if President-elect Donald Trump does, in fact, follow through on what he has said repeatedly that he will do, which is pull out of the Paris deal and cut funding and repeal a host of other climate regulations. I would like to hear from the others about what kind of impact you think that could have on your businesses and how you would react if indeed he does follow through on what he has said. Thank you.
Well, that's the 800-pound gorilla, right? And of course, none of us at this point in time know what's going to happen. If I knew, I probably wouldn't be here. But nonetheless, I think, if anything, first I would say we need to give the new administration a chance to develop rational policies. But I would also say that, if anything, I would think that the president-elect understands business. And to the extent that I think all of us have spoken today, that the things that we've been doing make business sense, we will continue to do those things. And that's really probably all I have to say about that.
I would just add that, we've just heard stories about billions of dollars of investment over many years that are helping to reduce emissions, expand clean energy. All of the decisions behind those investments were made in the absence of the Paris Agreement, in the absence of the Clean Power Plan, because they did make business sense. And a lot of the progress that we've made in the U.S. In reducing our emissions has been driven by market and technology forces. And those underlying forces will continue. So I think we have a lot to bank on there.
All right, we have time for several more questions. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Mira Sobi. I attend Johns Hopkins University. I'm here representing the American Chemical Society and student illiteracy on climate change. I heard Microsoft speaking specifically about increasing awareness of the programs that you've done to reduce emissions and climate change, taking climate change initiatives and spreading it amongst coworkers. Have you taken any initiatives specifically towards students and people who are using the programs? Because I specifically haven't heard of any of these initiatives, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to work more with students and take initiatives with them, since climate change is affecting us now, but it's going to affect the next generation a lot more.
Microsoft is working actually with schools and campuses to help campuses become more sustainable, whether it's driving efficiencies, helping them understand the benefits of organizational carbon fee, because even at a university level or a college level, having an internal carbon fee, you can raise the funds then for the students to be able to get more engaged. And so we're working with campuses around the world to better share best practices for what we've learned with our carbon fee and driving efficiencies and renewable energy, and from an accountability, that carbon fee. So definitely.
If I could actually just make one sort of related point. So you heard me mention earlier that beyond the sort of straight business case around energy costs and efficiency and all that one of the reasons we do this is because we think it's an important part of how we're going to compete for talent in the future, right? So I couldn't help but notice that, of the audience here, most of the questions have come from people that identify themselves as being a student at a university, right? So clearly this is important to them, important enough that they're standing up and asking us questions. So it proves the point that this is a big deal for the next generation of people that are going to work in and then ultimately lead our businesses. So I just wanted to sort of make that connection because it sort of jumped out at me.
Thanks. Do we have time for one more?
One more question out there? All right.
I'm Jeff Barton. I'm going to continue the student theme. This question's for you, Kevin. It sounds like you're doing a lot of great work with renewables and efficiency. I'm just curious, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Mars uses a lot of palm oil in their products, just like other companies. And so I'm just curious, obviously palm oil is a big source of carbon emissions. I'm curious what Mars plans to do to address that issue as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question, and thanks for another proof point for the argument. So yes, we do use palm oil. In the world of palm oil users, we don't actually use a lot of palm oil, but I'll maybe broaden the question to, we use a lot of raw materials. Raw materials have environmental impacts. So specific to palm oil, we like many of our peers, are committed to zero deforestation in our palm oil supply, and to improving and enhancing our ability to trace and track palm oil deeper into the supply chain so that we have a better understanding of what's going on. And you know, we've already achieved 100% certification of our palm oil supply, and we're also working on getting deeper into, you know, having more specific information further into those supply chains. So we absolutely care about our supply chain, palm oil and other raw materials. What we've done a lot of work on, particularly recently, is trying to develop. So there's a science-based target for greenhouse gas emissions, 2 degrees C, and then behind that is a carbon budget, and behind the carbon, you know, there's sort of lots of depth to that underlies what's going on here. There are other environmental impacts that matter, you know, water, land use. There isn't a 2 degrees C for water, or at least there's not an agreed 2 degrees C for water or for land. And we think, you know, we've seen the power of clear science and a clear target like 2 degrees C, and how it can drive a process that led to something like the Paris Agreement, you know, which, you know, let's not forget, that's an amazing accomplishment, right? That many countries agreed. I mean, that many countries don't agree on much anything else, right? So, you know, that's incredibly powerful. So if we can work out what that is for some of these other issues, hopefully we can drive progress just as fast, and then we can commit and set targets around those issues as well.
Well, I think we are out of time at this point. I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I want to thank Eric and the Edison Electric Institute for co-sponsoring this side event, and the U.S. Center for hosting us. And please join me in thanking our speakers.
Thank you, Elliot. And thank all of you for coming today. Again, another round of applause for Elliot, Kathy, Nanette, Kevin, and